Okay, hello everyone, bonjour. My name is Corinne Abba, and I'm the chair of the LEAP Steering Committee. Together with my colleague Siobhan Lennon from OCLS and Shannon Hayes from Fleming, we would like to offer you today an in-depth look at the LEAP tool with training to help you understand the accessibility needs that our users may face when accessing library databases. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We realize this is a strange time, and I know a lot of us are dealing with competing demands, including college closures locally, childcare, those kinds of things. So we thank those of you who were able to join and appreciate that others may have some other challenges. But not to worry, we are recording this session and we'll get it out, a copy of it to people as soon as possible so that you can access it at your convenience. Another thing of note, as presenters, we're not in our usual locations, and we hope that there are no disruptions beyond our control, like outside noises or internet issues or sirens or construction. So thank you for your patience in advance, and we might have to just have a brief pause if any of those sounds become an issue. As much as possible, we want to work together to reduce any background noise. So thank you for muting your lines. If you have a super pressing issue that you need addressed immediately, you can unmute your line, but we also have our chat going, which we encourage you to use, and we'll be monitoring that for questions. So we also endeavor to make this session as accessible as possible and ask that you please let us know if you experience any barriers to access. Again, a recording of the session will be made available as soon as possible, along with an accessible copy of the slides, so you will be able to refer back to them as needed. In terms of our agenda, we want to start with a brief overview of the purpose of the tool and the importance of assessments. We will review the model for distribution of assessments, which most of you will likely already be familiar with based on our outreach to LEAP leads. We want to do a demo of the tool to get everyone acquainted with its look and feel and its main components. And then we're going to jump into the specifics. So looking at each of the 4 modules specifically to cover some of the key concepts and to provide some examples of how to test these concepts. We have left time at the end of this presentation for questions and answers, and we'll also be monitoring the chat feature in Zoom. In addition, we'll have resources cited at the end, which may be helpful for ongoing support for this work as needed. So this particular session is intended for college leads and for LEAP assessment contributors. So those who will be using the tool to contribute assessments to the LEAP project. So most of you have likely already taken the introductory training this past February, and where the goal is to build on that from here. So today we're offering additional details on how to navigate the tool and how to complete an assessment of a database using LEAP. We'll provide some examples of assessment questions, and we'll offer overviews of some of the key assistive technologies that will be utilized when completing an assessment, such as screen reading software and web accessibility evaluation software. That said, we want to be clear that our intention is not to train everyone on every concept or every question in each of the modules, but rest assured the modules are written to support you. So they were built with this idea of containing detailed instructional content to support you through this process. So our goal today is to get you familiar with the tool, how the modules work, and to give you some exposure to some of the high-level concepts related to our assessments. So now I'll pass it over to Siobhan, who will give us an overview of LEAP and an introduction to the tool assessments.
Thanks, Corinne. Many of you were in the intro session last month, so this may be a little bit of a refresher for some of you, but we want to speak about the LEAP tool and the pilot in general before we jump into the assessment process. So LEAP is an online resource that allows library staff at participating colleges to create and share accessibility assessments of library e-resources. The LEAP tool has 2 parts. It's a self-audit tool, which includes instructional content and an assessment process. By using this tool and following the process, library staff will add accessibility assessments to the LEAP repository. The repository will contain all of the published assessments created by library staff at any of the Ontario College libraries. These completed assessment reports will be used by library staff to support acquisitions decisions, support library users, and advocate for more accessible e-resources. So the purpose of LEAP is to provide library staff with detailed information on the accessibility of electronic resources and to allow them to identify where individual e-resources are meeting and failing to meet accessibility requirements. The assessment process is broken down into 4 modules: interface appearance, interface navigation, interface structure, and content. Within each module, there are a series of questions for library staff to answer as they assess an e-resource. Questions are structured so that the answer is always a simple drop-down with responses of always, sometimes, never, or not applicable. And we've done it that way to make the process easier for library staff and also to ensure that there's consistency between tests, and it also enables a score to be tallied automatically based on responses. The success of LEAP depends on the colleges completing assessments. With 24 colleges, each individual institution will not need to complete many assessments for us to start to build a repository of completed reports. These reports will provide information to library staff and accessibility staff about known obstacles within individual databases so that they can assist students with navigating e-resources. Assessment reports will also help library staff make acquisitions decisions by providing key information about known issues around AODA compliance with specific e-resources. And finally, assessments give college libraries leverage in advocating for accessible e-resources. So what is expected from the colleges and how will this be accomplished? The LEAP Steering Committee is responsible for coordinating the distribution of database assessments to be completed by the college libraries each year. So this starts with a process to gather feedback from the colleges and develop a priority list for assessments. This process is underway right now, and this will be repeated each winter as we approach a new year of assessments. And this will help us to ensure that higher priority database assessments will be completed first and help us to avoid duplication of assessments. The LEAP Steering Committee will work with the colleges to ensure that we've set targets that are realistic and doable for each college. These targets are based on the distribution model that was developed by the LEAP Local Implementation and Shared Workflows Working Group, which is on the screen here. It's meant to be a flexible model that takes into account the size of each college based on FTE. And the model is meant to be flexible, taking into account that capacity at each institution varies. So according to the model, small colleges would complete 1 to 2 assessments every year, medium colleges 2 to 3 assessments a year, and large colleges 3 to 6 assessments a year. Once the steering committee has heard back from each of the colleges about how many assessments they can commit to in the coming year, they'll gather the feedback about database priorities and then assign databases to each of the institutions to be completed over the next year before April 2021. So in a second, we'll actually look at the tool, but to give a little overview, LEAP has 3 main pages within the tool. There's a home page that lists most recent assessments, an e-resources page that includes a searchable and browsable list of all e-resources in the system, as well as vendors and scores. And users can select a resource and view the overall score or view more detailed assessments. And then an assessments page that includes a browsable and searchable list of assessments. Where users can view a brief summary of an e-resources score or the more detailed assessments for each of the 4 modules. So if you'll give me a moment, I'm just going to share my screen. And actually, while I do that, I hear that my daughter has started practicing the violin. Can you hear that through this through the audio?
I can't hear anything, no.
No, I can't.
Okay, good. I was worried for a second. Okay, this is actually the screen. And I do want to just give a little heads up that in the last training, I found that when I have my video conferencing program running and kind of browsing Leap, it was quite slow. So I apologize if it takes a few moments to load the pages. I've tried to mitigate that a bit by having different spaces available in different tabs, but that's just a little heads up. So you may have seen the tool in our introductory training. We're looking at the homepage now. And then across the top of the screen, we have our navigation menu where we can access assessments. And this gives us the list of completed assessments in the system. You can search this list using the filters at the top. And then from here, you can see a brief summary of the assessment score and click through for further details. You can also click on e-resources, and that will give you a browsable list of all the e-resources in the system. So this is the place where you'll go if you want to start an assessment. As the LEAP Steering Committee develops their list of priority databases, we'll make sure that the e-resource list is added here so that those are available to you. And wherever you are in LEAP, you'll see this list of shortcuts. The first thing there is the LEAP Guide for College Library Staff. This is a guide on how to use the LEAP website, and it really has a technical focus. So there's an overview of LEAP itself. There's instructions on creating an assessment, instructions on accessing the list of e-resources, and so on. So that's available to you anytime. Below that, you'll see the overview of third-party tools. This is a user-friendly document about how to use the tools and techniques that we reference throughout the assessment process. So you'll learn a bit about some of these later on, but as you can see here, it covers everything from Wave, NVDA, JAWS, as well as other software and browser extensions. And there's also instructions for how to use your keyboard. How to use your keyboard to navigate a website. We've tried to keep the information very simple and easy to follow, but if you do have feedback, please share it with us. So we'll jump back into the tool at the end of our session today to look at how to use the tool to create an assessment and how to access a detailed report. But for now, I will get back to the slides and pass it back to Corinne and Shannon, who will talk in more detail about the concepts and tools that are covered in the modules.
Thank you, Siobhan. Just a reminder to all our participants, if you could please mute your line just to reduce background noise, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so starting off with Module 1, this was developed to help library staff assess the accessibility of e-resources with a specific focus on interface appearance. So with these assessments, we're concentrating on how elements of the interface appear to ensure that they are accessible and straightforward to identify, understand, and use. Two of the main concepts in this module include alternative text, or alt text, as it relates to the use of images, and the color and contrast of the interface and various elements within that interface. In terms of the assessment, both of these can be assessed visually by the person completing the assessment and also by using the Wave tool. Alt text, or alternative text, is an attribute added to an image tag in HTML to describe an image. For users who rely on assistive technology to read content, or for those for whom visual information offers less value than textual content, images can become major obstacles when navigating a database interface. This is particularly true when they contain information not found in text, such as numbers, charts, or artworks. So text can be embedded in an image as alt text, or it can be provided beside the image, explaining its content and function. In some cases, images also have a function, for instance, when they act as links. And it's important that all users are able to understand the function of these images so that they can interact with them appropriately. So including alternative text or an alt text version or a text version is a crucial first step towards making an interface accessible and user-friendly for everyone, including people who are blind or people with low vision. Alt text should convey the same information as the image using language. To evaluate a database's correct use of alt text, we will be checking if images on the page have corresponding text equivalents. Some best practices for alt text include that the text communicate the content and the function of the image. Alt text should be succinct. A few words or a couple of brief sentences should really suffice, usually, but we should also keep in mind that context does matter. So if it's an image of a painting and it's for an art history course, we would expect more details to be added in. Alt text is not necessary in cases where the alt text would repeat information already contained in the context of the image, for example, in the image caption. And it's not necessary to include image of or graphic of in the alt text. It's usually apparent to a user, screen reader users in particular, that that's the case. So it's important to convey to the user that an image, if it's important to convey to the user that an image is a photograph or an illustration, then that would be included in the alt text. We should also remember that decorative images should not distract users from important content. Decorative images that serve as visual decoration, like a logo on every landing page, do not convey important information and therefore do not need alt text. When we are assessing images, we should find an empty alt tag attribute, which is alt, the equal sign, and then the double quotation marks open and closed. And this causes a screen reader basically to ignore or jump over that image. So now I want to pass it over to Shannon to show us how an assessment would be done.
Okay, thanks. So this is an example of a question that you'll see in Module 1, asking you to evaluate the existence and content of alt text for images in a resource. In the module, you'll be asked to assess the alt text using the supporting tool WAVE. You'll be looking for whether an image, graph, or chart includes alt text, as well as whether the description provides an equivalent user experience to sighted users. So for example, a search button with a magnifying glass in it should say search rather than the word magnifying glass. So in the next slide here, we've got a brief video demonstration on how to assess the alt text of images using WAVE. In this demonstration, we'll be going over how to assess the inclusion of alt text for images within a resource using the supporting tool WAVE. You'll be using WAVE for a number of assessments within the module beyond just alt text. You'll be able to download WAVE and other supporting resources from the third-party tools page found within LEAP. Our third-party tools page will offer you a full list of supporting tools as well as instructional support for both downloading and navigating these supporting resources. WAVE is an accessibility evaluation tool that provides visual feedback about an online resource's content by injecting icons and indicators onto the page. To run a WAVE report, simply select the W icon in your Chrome or Firefox browser while on the resource page you're evaluating. WAVE will offer a report summary of issues within the page that will require further review. Selecting the Detail tab will present you with more information about the accessibility concerns on this page. Red icons indicate accessibility errors. Yellow icons indicate alerts that WAVE can verify and requires an evaluator to manually assess. And green icons indicate accessibility features. If used properly, these items can enhance the accessibility of web content. On this page, there is missing alt text, which will result in an empty link to a film thumbnail, which will fail to be read by a screen reader. Further opening the code function, you'll be able to assess where the alt text is missing. If we select a green icon, we can see that the image labeled CBC Radio Canada has an appropriate alt text that's labeled as such. And now I'll pass it over to Corinne, who will talk a little bit about color and contrast.
Sorry, I'm just stuck on this slide here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Excellent, thank you. So the other key concept in Module 1 is color, including color contrast. Color is often used on web pages to convey information, indicate an action, prompt a response, or distinguish a visual element. Although color can be an important way to interact with information, especially to some users with cognitive disabilities, for other users who are partially sighted or blind, or for users who have difficulty identifying or distinguishing between colors, it can be difficult to navigate content when color is used as the only means of conveying information. Our partially sighted users also experience barriers when they come across poor contrast, and they may struggle to differentiate text from its background or distinguish details on a given image. When we are testing for color contrast, there are a few exclusions. In terms of large-scale text, this is 18-point or 14-point bold in size, we need to have a contrast ratio of at least 3:1. There is no contrast requirements for text or images of text that are incidental or part of an inactive user interface component that are pure decoration and not visible to anyone, or that are part of a picture that contains significant other visual content. Also, text that is part of a logo or brand name has no minimum contrast requirements. In terms of best practices, according to the W3C guidelines, the visual presentation of text and images of text must have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1, and that meets our level AA. We must have a contrast ratio of at least 7:1 to meet AAA. And now I'll pass it over to Shannon to do a demo, an example of how to check a database to see if it meets our 4.5:1 contrast ratio.
Great. So when completing a color contrast assessment, you'll be instructed to use the WAVE tool found in the third-party tool page. The module questions will prompt you to assess whether the text and images have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1. The module instructions will guide you through opening the WAVE extension and searching for contrast errors outlined in WAVE. You'll be searching for instances of both contrast ratios and text that fail to meet the 4.5:1 minimum. And for context, white text on white background will have a 1:1 color contrast ratio, while black text on white background will have a 21:1 ratio. So here we have a video demonstration of how to assess the color contrast of a database using the WAVE assessment tool.
To complete a color contrast test while on the resource page you're planning to assess, select the WAVE extension in Chrome. Again, WAVE can be downloaded from our Assessments tool page found within LEAP. From the Summary Evaluation column, select the Contrast tab to the right. A series of color contrast errors, if any, will be listed. Clicking an icon will bring you to an instance where an image or text does not meet the 4.5:1 ratio requirements. We will highlight the contrast ratio, which in this case is 3.38:1, and offer samples of how regular text size and large text size of this contrast ratio fail to meet the accessibility requirements. Moving through the icons, we can see further examples of color contrast ratios that fall beneath the 4.5:1 minimum.
So now I'll pass it back over to Corinne for our Module 2 key concepts.
Thank you. So for Module 2, the purpose is to help library staff assess the accessibility of e-resources with a specific focus on the interface navigation, which describes how a user moves around or navigates through a particular web page or database. The key concepts in Module 2 are navigation through the platform interface using the keyboard commands and navigating forms to ensure that the fields and buttons are clearly labeled and accessible using assistive technology. In terms of tools, to complete Module 2, you will need to access a keyboard as well as the Wave tool to help you assess forms. So let's talk about keyboard navigation since it's used in a few places in Module 2. Many library users navigate the computer with their keyboard rather than with a mouse. This includes users who have physical disabilities and may have difficulty controlling a mouse, as well as users with visual impairments who may not see the cursor on their screen. Keyboard shortcuts allow users who do not use a mouse to navigate through a website, prompting a read aloud feature to access and move between links, buttons, forms, and other controls. In order to ensure that users can access the same content and use a web page in the same way as users navigating by use of a mouse, it is essential that all elements be accessible via keyboard. Testing interface navigation is primarily structured around the understanding of how accessible a resource is by using keyboard navigation techniques. There are common keys used in keyboard operation of web pages and web-based applications, including using the tab key to move to the next link, form, or element or button, using Enter to activate the current link or button, using up and down, right and left arrows to move between radio buttons, for example. Remember, you can find support for all of this and more in the overview of third-party tools. It's a document that gives detailed instructions for using various third-party tools, as well as specific techniques, including keyboard navigation. As a reminder, this documentation can be found directly in the LEAP tool. And I'll pass it over to Shannon for some examples to further explain.
Thanks. So this is an example of a question you'll find in Module 2, which will require you to assess the keyboard navigation functions of a resource. So the example question is, can all menus and submenus be assessed with screen readers and via keyboard navigation? To answer this, you'll need to navigate to the e-resource that you're testing, turn keyboard navigation on, and then attempt to access menus and submenus within the tool. So here we've developed a brief clip on how to assess keyboard navigation within a database.
This video will demonstrate how to perform keyboard navigation. From the resources page, you can begin keyboard navigation by pressing the Tab key. When doing so, you should notice a highlighted box appear around each function called the focus indicator. By pressing the Tab key, the focus indicator should move forward logically to the next highlighted element. Pressing the Shift and Tab key, you should notice the focus indicator move backwards to the previously highlighted element. When evaluating elements like menu navigation, tab to a menu item in the database and press the space bar. This should expand the menu and allow you to navigate through the menu options by pressing the arrow keys. Pressing the Enter key should allow you to select a menu item. Closing the menu can be done by selecting the Escape key.
So now I'll pass it back over to Corinne, who will cover the importance of forms.
Thanks. Another key concept in Module 2 is forms. Forms can be essential to a user's interaction with a website or e-resource. When we are looking at forms, we need to ensure that they are accessible according to the following criteria: that they are clearly labeled form fields and buttons that are visible and announced by assistive technology such as screen readers. Users need to be notified of any errors they make when submitting a form, i.e. the failure to fill in all required fields. Users need to be able to clearly identify the field where the error occurred, read a description of the error, and then be redirected to the error field to make the corrections and resubmit their form. Many forms contain placeholder text, which is the text that appears within the form field that disappears once a user starts typing. Placeholder text is not an accessible substitute for labels and instructions. So where placeholder text is present, these fields should also contain clear labels as well as additional instructions that allow users to enter, review, and then submit their entries. For form fields to be accessible, one of the following must be true. It must be reversible. When form submissions are reversible, it allows the users to return and revise the information provided. It must be checked. This means data entered by the user is automatically checked for errors and the user is provided an opportunity to correct them. Or it must be confirmed. This occurs when there is a mechanism available for reviewing, confirming, and correcting information before finalizing the submission. And now over to Shannon to show how to test for forms.
So in Module 2, you'll be asked to evaluate error report messages for accessibility. Examples of questions within the module include inputting an incorrect address when emailing yourself a record, or submitting form information in an incorrect format, including wrong login information, or using letters instead of numbers and limiters. The database should provide an error report that the incorrect email was entered and allows the user to return to the form to correct the error using keyboard navigation. You'll be assessing whether the alert messages are clearly readable to the user at either the top of the form field, in line, or through a dialog box. When assessing resources, you'll be asked to use a screen reader to determine the accessibility of a database for low vision users. Many institutions have access to screen readers such as JAWS. However, you can download open access software such as NVDA. NVDA, or Non-Visual Desktop Access, is an open access screen reader. Accessing a resource through NVDA can highlight some of the obstacles that screen readers face when navigating a database. It can also be an experiential way to understand how low or no vision users access our resources. While it can be important to evaluate the accessibility of online content using a screen reader, it can also seem complicated for the occasional user, but this doesn't have to be the case. If you're new to screen readers, plan on spending a bit of time getting familiar with some example pages. Don't get discouraged if things seem confusing at first. Slow down the reading speed and take your time. We have a link to NVDA as well as NVDA shortcuts posted on the third-party tools page. Here we've included a short video clip to guide you through some of the basic concepts of navigating a screen reader such as NVDA.
So what I'm going to do is give you sort of like a brief tour of how to navigate the page using NVDA. So I've got a JS bin that I've created that just has a few simple controls on it, and this will get us familiar with some of the basics of moving around in the screen reader. So I'm on this page here. This page just has a few headings, some paragraphs of text, and an input field with a sign up button next to it, right? So simple button element. So we know that most screen reader users, when they land on an unfamiliar document, are going to navigate by heading. And to do that in NVDA, we use the H key. So let's try that out.
Second heading, heading level 2. Third heading, heading level 3.
So the H key moves us forward through the headings. Shift H is going to move us backwards.
Second heading, first heading, heading level 1.
We can also move by line by pressing the up and down arrow key. So if I hit the down arrow key, we'll just move down to the next paragraph of text.
The first paragraph is full of introductory content. This is web.
Right. We can also move by individual character too, and this is useful for screen reader users when they land on a word that maybe the text-to-speech software pronounces poorly. So like the word Udacity, it'll probably pronounce it in kind of a weird way, and so they might navigate through the individual characters to see how it's actually spelled. So to do that, we just hit the left and right arrow keys.
H-E space F-I-R.
Right, pretty easy. Now, what separates NVDA from a screen reader like VoiceOver is that NVDA is a modal screen reader, meaning when you're in VoiceOver, you're kind of always in the same mode. You're sort of always browsing around. You can kind of just interact with things whenever you want. And that's because VoiceOver uses kind of an elaborate set of keyboard shortcuts to move around the screen. With NVDA, because the shortcuts are sort of more abbreviated, right? They're just single characters and things like that. It means that when we land on something like a form control, we need to tell the screen reader to switch into a special mode so we can interact with that form. So let's try that out. So I've got some form elements down here. If I want to jump to the next available form element on the page, I can hit the F key.
Edit has autocomplete hello world.
So you can see that put me on this text field. I can jump to the sign up button by hitting it again.
Sign up button.
And just like we saw with headings, Shift F is going to move us backwards.
Edit has autocomplete hello world.
Now, if I were to hit the H key to start typing in this field, what it's actually going to do, though, is just move me to the next heading, because we haven't told the screen reader to enter forms or focus mode yet. So to do that, we'll use the NVDA key, which remember is caps lock, and the space bar. And you hear that little tone, right? That little sort of typewriter sound. That tells the screen reader user that, hey, now you're in forms mode. You can start typing text kind of free form. So I could say, hello world.
O-W-T-S-G.
And because I had the caps lock key on, it's typing in all caps. But you get the idea, right? You can type into the text field whenever you want. Now to exit forms mode, we basically do the same thing with the NVDA key and spacebar, or caps lock and spacebar to get out. And again, it'll play a little tone to tell us that we're exiting forms mode. Now,
Great. So I'll pass it back over. Oh, sorry. I'll pass it back over to Corinne to introduce Module 3 key concepts.
Awesome, thank you. So that was Module 2. Module 3, the purpose is to help library staff evaluate the accessibility of e-resources with a specific focus on the interface structure. Text-to-speech is assistive technology that reads aloud digital text. This is important because when text-to-speech, or TTS, software is embedded into a platform, it increases access for many people, including people who are blind and can't see what's on the screen, people who are partially sighted and can't see certain types of content, people who may have cognitive issues who need to hear and see the text to better understand it, and people who prefer to listen so that they can perform other tasks at the same time. Text-to-speech can be accessed by users of Adobe Read Aloud, Read and Write for Google Chrome, and also by screen reader users of JAWS or NVDA, which we just looked at. In order for text-to-speech to work effectively, it requires that websites and e-resources structure their headings according to best practices. Properly labeled headings enable screen reader navigation, and screen readers have features that enable users to list all of the headings on a page. If text is only styled as a heading, i.e. it uses bold or large font, but it isn't coded that way in the background, then screen readers won't recognize it as a heading. So with that, I'll pass it over to Shannon, who can show us how this can be assessed in LEAP.
So in Module 3, you'll be asked to assess whether a page has headings and subheadings clearly labeled and tagged, and whether the hierarchy of these headings has been placed logically. So there's some general rules for headings. So in order to assess how headings are subdivided hierarchically, so we need to understand some of these rules. So first degree headings, heading level 1, are the most important headings on a page. For example, page titles or main content headings. Then there's second degree headings, or level 2 headings. These are usually subheadings beneath a level 1 heading, and usually include major page content. Then there are third degree headings, and these are subheadings beneath level 2 headings, and usually they contain minor content. So lower degree headings should always be contained within the headings of the next level. So skipping heading levels should be avoided. So for example, if you have a level 1 heading followed by a level 3 heading is usually less accessible. Headings should not be used for other content that are not headings. So for example, for visual effect. So in the next slide, we'll just go over how to evaluate headings in Wave. So the Wave tool has a function to test the logical hierarchy of information on a page. In this video, we'll showcase how to use Wave to determine the formatting of headings in a database.
Here we will demonstrate how to assess the inclusion and proper hierarchy of headings used in an e-resource. Begin by navigating to the e-resource you're testing and opening the Wave extension, which will appear on the left-hand side of your browser. Select the Structure tab, which will highlight a list of headings found within the resource. In this example, you can see that Heading 1 includes a database name, which is typically found in this heading style. Heading 2 offers major page content. Examples include the toolbar, an option to browse by discipline, as well as a search tools option. Heading 3 includes search tools such as Topic Finder, Subject Guide Search, and Publication Search, which are all subheadings under heading number 2. In this example, the main content would follow accessibility guidelines.
Just pass it back over to Corinne, who will introduce some Module 4 concepts.
Thank you. So Module 4 was developed in collaboration with our advisory group comprised of students who self-identified as having print disabilities. In this module, you will be specifically assessing the content within a database, which most often includes PDF articles and also videos and audio content. For this module, you will not be assessing the interface itself, but rather its content. The main concept in this module includes reviewing PDFs. There are a range of tools to be used to support us in these assessments, including our keyboard, a visual assessment, Adobe Read Aloud, Google Chrome Read and Write, and Adobe Accessibility Checker. A PDF is a commonly used format for articles and book chapters, but the quality and type of PDF document can vary significantly depending on how they were created. There are 3 types of PDFs: searchable and tagged PDFs, searchable but not tagged PDFs, and image-only PDFs. To be accessible, PDF documents must be searchable and tagged with meaningful information. Other accessibility features would include alternative text for images, the proper use of headings and subheadings, and also a defined language. Older PDFs in particular tend to be image files rather than actual text characters, since they were usually created by scanning physical items. Some interlibrary document delivery services also convert well-structured PDFs to image-only files so that the patron who is on the receiving end might receive an inaccessible file even if it started its journey as a well-structured tagged document. Making PDFs accessible tends to benefit all users. For example, the document structure that enables a screen reader to read a PDF out loud is also what enables a mobile device to reflow and display the document on a small screen. Similarly, the preset tab order of an accessible PDF form helps all users, not just users with mobility impairments, for example, in order to fill a form more easily. If a PDF is an image-only file, it is not accessible. Screen readers cannot detect text in an image-only PDF, which renders these documents unusable in conjunction with assistive technologies. This is problematic, and many databases still house PDFs, which are image-only documents, and our users will not be able to access them. And so we need to conduct these assessments to better understand the content of our library databases, to ensure that we're aware of any barriers our patrons may encounter, and to offer ways to mitigate the impact of these access issues. When we're in a given library database, we should find an example of a PDF article and download it. Please note that the quality of content will vary within a given database, so it's always recommended that you sample 3 to 5 articles to get a sense of the accessibility range for the given content. You might also want to refine your searches in the databases to older items for some of these samples. When we find a sample PDF article, we need to test whether that PDF is extractable and whether it is searchable. If the text is extractable, then you'll be able to highlight the text using your mouse or keyboard. You can copy and paste it into a Word document, for example. You can also test if the PDF is searchable by opening the search bar using the Control Command F or by going to the Edit Find menu and then typing a word from the text and pressing Enter. If the text is not searchable and not extractable, that means that it is an image-only PDF that was scanned without OCR. OCR being the technology that enables the conversion of different types of documents into editable and searchable data so that the original document can be accessed and edited. If the text is searchable but not extractable, it is what we call a locked PDF, and these are often not accessible for screen readers or other types of adaptive technology. In order to test this, we use accessibility features found in an Acrobat Reader, including Read Aloud. This allows us to test the PDF file format to ensure that people with disabilities may access PDFs with or without screen readers, magnifiers, and Braille printers. To use Read Out Loud, you need Adobe Reader and a text-to-speech engine installed in your system. Once you activate Read Out Loud, make sure that your sound is on and listen carefully to how the document is being read. We want to pay particular attention to whether the document reads the blank spaces as blank, which indicates that the document has not been correctly structured using headings and other elements. And now over to Shannon with an example.
Thanks. So here's an example of the type of question that you'll see in Module 4. In this module, you'll be asked to test whether a PDF is extractable and searchable, or whether the PDF is considered to be image only. Because the quality and the content will vary within a given database, it's recommended that you sample 3 to 5 articles to get a sense of the accessibility range of the given content. So here we have a quick video on how to determine whether a PDF file is non-extractable or image only.
Here is an example of what a non-extractable PDF would look like. These PDFs have been scanned from a print document and are image only. To test this, open the PDF that you would like to test. Press the Ctrl and F buttons to activate the Find on this page function. You should see a search box pop up on the right-hand side of the screen. Type in a word that you see exists in the document. If the Find on this page function determines that there are no results, double-check the spelling to make sure that you have it correct. If there are still no results, then it would indicate that this is an image-only document, not able to be read by a screen reader or text-speech software.
So just pass it over to Siobhan, who will demonstrate how to perform assessments within LEAP.
Thanks, Shannon. Okay, we're going to head back into the tool and we'll take a look with a little bit more depth here. Okay, so if you want to create an assessment within LEAP, you need to be signed in. And then from the home page, you select the eResources tab at the top. So the first thing you'll do is check to see if your eResource is listed here. If it is, then you can select the resource and then click on Start New Assessment. If you don't see your eResource here, you'll need to add it. So if you select the Add New eResource button at the top of the screen, you'll be taken to a form page where you'll add the information about the database. So we will add Science Direct. You need to add the URL. You can choose the type of eResource if you wish, but this is not mandatory. And then you need to select a vendor. The LEAP team will populate this tool with a list of vendors. So you can scroll through and see if you can find your vendor here. If you can't, what you need to do is choose Other. And the LEAP team will be able to update this at a later date. And then just click Save. So once you've done that, we've now created a record for the database, and then we're prompted to start a new assessment. So we click on Start a New Assessment. And then we're prompted to choose our institution. So I will pick OCLS just for today, and then save. And now we have created a record for the assessment, so we can start going through the actual assessment. As we talked about before, there are 4 modules. It will automatically start us on module 1, which is what we see here. So while we're here, let's just take a look at what's in front of us before we jump into navigating back and forth between the modules. So each module starts with a brief introduction that tells you about the module, gives some basic instructions about how to move through the assessment, and then lists the tool you'll need for that particular module. So that's all in the introduction section. And then the questions within each module are grouped into different sections around a similar concept. So for example, module 1 starts by looking at images. For each of these concepts, you'll find detailed background information as well as instructional content so that as you go through the process, you know what you're looking for and how to answer the questions. For each question, you'll see that the answers are in a drop-down, and you can choose never, sometimes, always, or not applicable. And we also encourage library staff to leave comments and notes. Often having some additional information can help library staff and accessibility technicians better understand how that resource meets or fails to meet an accessibility standard. So you can save your work at any point and exit by scrolling to the bottom of the page. So it's not necessary to complete the modules in order or to complete the questions in order. The default is to save each module as complete, but the system won't let you do that unless you've answered every question. So if we tried to save and exit now, we'd get a little error message telling us that there were questions that were skipped. So what we need to do is save as draft. And then if we want to return another day, we can click on save and exit. But if we want to move through and say start with module 4, we can do that. We just need to create each module along the way first as a draft, and then we can go back and forth as we wish. So we'll click on next. All right, so now we're at module 2. So we're going to just kind of go through these save as draft and get to module 4. So I'll just quickly save. It follows the same format and structure as the previous module. Save it as draft. And do the same thing for module 3. My internet seems to have slowed down, so just bear with me for a moment. Okay, there we go. So you'll see that as you save each module, this pagination kind of starts to allow a little bit more granularity. So as we go through, we can jump back and forth to any page here using these buttons down here. So once you're done that, we can save this as draft and save and exit. One thing I do want to mention before we do that, in order to publish your assessment, as you go through, you need to update this status to complete. And then once all 4 modules are set as complete, the assessment as a whole will be published and available to anybody who logs into the LEAP platform. So we'll just click on save and exit. And that takes us to the assessment summary page. So from here, what you can see is the overall score so far, as well as the score for each module. We haven't actually filled anything in, so it's automatically giving us an F, but you'll see that update as you go. You can jump back in to any of these modules at this point by clicking the view. If you click view, you'll see all the answers so far. So right now we just see a lot of blanks, and we can navigate back and forth through the modules. So if these were complete, you could jump through and see the results, or you can choose to go back to assessment. And you can also click on edit to get back into the modules and continue along. So another area I'd like to show you is your dashboard, which you can access in your navigation menu. So your dashboard is going to show you all of your assessments, whether they're in progress or complete. So we can see this one here is complete and it's been published, and this is the one we just started today. So we can see that 0 of 4 modules are complete and it's saved in draft status. So this is a great place to start if you want to keep working on an assessment that you've already created, or if you'd like to edit one that you've already published. And just click on continue to do that. So let's take a look at a completed assessment. So we click on view. We come to that assessment summary page so we can see the overall score. I do want to just mention this is a test assessment, so this score is meaningless. It's just test answers. But we can see the overall score for the assessment in general, and we can see the score for each module. We can click on view for any of the modules, and then we'll see how that e-resource fared in terms of each of these accessibility criteria. If any notes were made, you'll see those appear here as well. And then again, we can jump through and see all of the modules using the navigation at the bottom. There's also some new functionality that has been created by our developer that I'd like to show you. Actually, let's scroll down and go back to assessment. So this is actually something that is still in progress. So we're in the testing phase here, just to get rid of, to clean up any bugs and make sure it's working the way we like. But that's this button here, View Assessment Report. There's some overlap between some of the functionality here, and that's something that we'll be cleaning up. But if we click on this, we come to a list that we can filter all of the questions in the assessment by module and by question. So if the default here is to filter by all answers and all modules, and we can click on filter and we'll see the entire list of questions. But we can also filter in other ways. So for example, if you want to see any accessibility issues, you can filter just to include questions that had an answer of sometimes or never, and then we need to get rid of this all answers. Click on filter, and you'll see everything that came up as having an issue as you went through the assessment. You can also download these results in a CSV file. So if you want to download the entire report with all your answers, you need to just make sure that it's filtered to include all answers and all modules. Click on filter, and then when you go to the bottom of the page, you can click on export CSV. And I can show you what that looks like if you'll just hold on one moment. So this is what that looks like. It includes, it'll include the score for the entire assessment. Again, this is in progress, so it's not looking exactly the way it will eventually, but it will also include the score for each module and then a list of all of the questions. So you can filter that on your own and you can share it as you need. And eventually this could be something that gets shared with vendors. Okay, so that's everything that we wanted to show you about the tool. So we're on track to begin piloting LEAP in April. Our focus right now is on developing the LEAP database priorities, and we're working on that with our LEAP college leads. Once we've received responses from each of the college libraries, we'll be in touch to distribute assessments. We're also working to make sure that everyone is set up with a LEAP account to make sure that you can access the tool. The college libraries are working on local implementation before the end of March. And finally, training is ongoing. We'll share a recording of this advanced session that you can share with any colleagues who missed today, or you can review as needed. If it's necessary for an additional session, please let us know and we can arrange that. If you do have any questions or concerns as we move through these last steps of implementation, please don't hesitate to get in touch.